Okay, let's unpack this bizarre journey into the life of Elizabeth Báthory. You could definitely call her the OG Gothic villain,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. The story. It has everything.
It really does. Murder, these like creepy death rituals, her castle looming over all those handmaidens, and then of course the really unsettling stuff about bloodbaths.
And the key thing, she wasn't just some random person. She was a powerful countess in Eastern Europe. It's this mix of horror, politics.
Maybe even the seeds of vampire lore. It's wild. Welcome everyone to Lifespan. We're the podcast that, digs up the dirt on history's most outrageous lives. Forget school history. This is the unhinged side.
Yeah, we try to make it fascinating. Definitely share, rate, follow if you like these kinds of stories.
So for this bizarre journey on the Lifespan podcast, we're diving deep. Elizabeth Báthory, the Blood Countess.
And our mission, really, is to sift through it all. Who was she before the legends? What was her world like?
Exactly. The alleged crimes, the reaction, all those theories. We'll be using the testimonies we have to try and piece it together.
Separating fact from, well, centuries of spooky fiction. It's a challenge.
It is. So let's start at the beginning. Who was Elizabeth Báthory, really? She wasn't exactly, lowborn.
No, not at all. Her family, the Báthorys, major power players in Hungary, Transylvania. Huge influence.
Born 1560. Serious castle cred. Her family tree is loaded with military leaders, politicians.
And a few folks with, let's say, darker reputations already. It wasn't exactly a squeaky clean lineage.
Right, but she wasn't just some noblewoman sitting around either. Apparently she was really smart.
Yeah, fluent in multiple languages, Latin, Greek, German, Hungarian. That's quite impressive for the time.
Definitely. Then, get this, age 10, she's betrothed to Frank Gnadisdy.
Ah, yes, the Black Knight of Hungary.
Charming nickname, huh? Known for being pretty brutal during the Turkish Wars. Impaling was apparently his signature move.
Well, these early betrothals were standard procedure for nobility then. It was all about power, alliances, not romance.
Good point. And while Frank was off, being the Black Knight, Elizabeth was managing the massive Gnadisdy estate.
Which was a huge responsibility. We're talking villages, finances, legal matters.
Yeah.
She was essentially the feudal CEO.
Right. Huge power over the people on her land. So she's clearly capable, intelligent, powerful in her own right.
Which makes the central question even more intriguing, doesn't it?
Totally. Was she genuinely unhinged, this monster? Or is there something else going on? This is where you fall down those, midnight Reddit rabbit holes.
That competence complicates the simple mad woman in the castle story. It makes you wonder, what else was at play?
Okay, so context. We need to understand her world. 16th century Eastern Europe. It's the Renaissance elsewhere, maybe. But Hungary.
Hungary felt more like, well, like you said, Game of Thrones territory, constant instability.
You had the huge threat from the Ottoman Empire, always looming. War was just normal life.
And intense religious paranoia, too. Calvinists versus Catholics, lots of suspicion.
Plus, witch trials were a big thing. People genuinely believed in curses, demons, blood magic. It wasn't just superstition. It was real fear for them.
Exactly. That belief system created fertile ground for accusations, easy to weaponize.
And crucially, the nobility. Basically untouchable. Their power over peasants was absolute.
So if some lower-class girls disappeared near a noble's castle, it wouldn't necessarily trigger immediate alarm bells. Not initially, anyway.
Elizabeth was like this feudal boss with effectively legal immunity. It explains how things could have potentially gone on for so long, right?
That impunity is absolutely key. It shielded the powerful.
Right. Okay, let's get into the grim part, the alleged crimes. Catch this castle? Sounds less like a home and more like Castle of Nightmares is putting it mildly.
The alleged kill count itself is, well, it's all over the place.
Yeah, you hear 80 confirmed, maybe bodies found, then witness testimony pushes it over 300.
And then there's that absolutely staggering figure of 650 from a supposed servant's ledger.
Which, okay, massive grain of salt on that last one. But even 80 or 300, it's horrific. These numbers come from the testimonies, but we have to remember how they were gathered.
The discrepancies really show how hard it is to know the facts. The higher numbers depend on testimony collected later, possibly under duress, possibly exaggerated.
And the methods described in those testimonies, just, stomach-churning.
Brutal stuff.
Beating girls till their bones broke, starvation, burning. One account mentions sewing someone into a horse carcass.
Just awful. Covering them in honey for insects, freezing them, bleeding them out.
Biting, strangling, stabbing. And that one detail about forcing a girl to cook and eat her own flesh. I mean, WTF.
These accounts, even allowing for exaggeration, paint a picture of extreme, almost unbelievable cruelty and sadism.
And then the most famous part, bathing in virgin blood to stay young. It's the image everyone knows.
But here's the twist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bloodbaths, they aren't actually in the original trial records. That seems to have come later, like a century later. Folklore.
It's a crucial distinction. The legend evolved. That bloodbath detail likely tapped into existing fears about blood, magic, immortality.
Made her image even more monstrous, yeah.
Exactly.
But the testimonies do mention something. Servants claiming she'd wipe blood on her face after beatings and reacted weirdly when it dried.
Right, and you can kind of see how that detail may be misinterpreted or amplified.
Could morph into the whole vampire bloodbath thing over time, like the creepy little seed of the legend.
Precisely. Small details get twisted, sensationalized, stories get told and retold.
So, with all these horrific claims, why wasn't she just, executed immediately?
Short answer, power. She was immensely powerful, trying to prosecute and execute a countess of her standing back then.
Huge political risk, right? Could destabilize everything.
Absolutely. Other noble families would have been watching very closely.
But eventually, things caught up. 1610, after an investigation led by her own cousin-in-law, Count Thurzo, she's arrested.
But, and this is but she was never actually put on trial.
Never. Unlike her servants, they were interrogated, likely tortured, and executed pretty quickly. But Elizabeth, no public trial.
And that lack of a trial is a major red flag. It fuels so many of the conspiracy theories. Why avoid a public hearing?
What happened instead? The verdict, if you can call it that, was just bizarre. They walled her up.
Literally bricked her into a room in her own castle. Countess, just slits left for food and air.
And she died in there, 1614, age 54. Which just brings us right back to the question, was that the whole truth? Or was something else going on?
That method of confinement, not execution, but isolation, it just adds layers to the mystery.
Yeah.
Silences her, but avoids a messy public execution.
Okay, let's dive headfirst into this blood-soaked rabbit hole of theories. Theory number one is pretty simple. She did it. All of it.
The straightforward serial killer explanation.
And their support, right. Over 300 witness testimonies, peasants, nobles, clergy pointing the finger, calling her a monster.
It sounds compelling, that sheer number. But as we said, the reliability is questionable.
Exactly. How many actually saw anything firsthand? It sounds more like a giant game of medieval telephone. Rumors, hearsay.
Possibly coercion, too. Getting unbiased accounts from peasants about nobility. Very difficult back then.
Okay, theory number two, my personal favorite, maybe. She was framed, set up by powerful men who wanted her land, her money.
This theory really plays on the power dynamics. A wealthy, independent woman in that era should be a target.
Think about it. She was incredibly rich, a woman running her own show in a super patriarchal world. Her family had enemies. The king owed her money.
The Habsburg court was interested in her lands too, reportedly.
So what's a convenient way to get rid of her and grab her stuff? Accuse her of something horrific, like demonic murder. Classic political power play.
The motive is definitely plausible. Fabricating accusations was a known tactic. She might have been a victim of the very system she was part of.
Then theory three, the vampire stuff, the blood baths, pure fan fiction.
As we said, not in the original testimonies. That legend really takes off in the 1700s.
Right when vampire myths were booming across Europe. Perfect timing.
So the image we have is probably shaped more by later cultural trends than the initial facts.
You get writers, pamphlets, later horror fans. They just ran with it. Turned her into Dracula's evil aunt or something.
It shows how stories evolve, how cultural anxieties get projected onto historical figures. She became a symbol for fears about female power, the supernatural.
And theory four, maybe she was into witchcraft.
There are some accounts, right? Cursing priests, collecting body parts, owning a spell book.
Could just be the standard satanic panic of the time. Accusing inconvenient people of witchcraft was common.
Especially women in power, or those seen as different.
But maybe there was something there, like, I don't know, 16th century necro skincare rituals. It sounds nuts, but...
Well, it's a less conventional take. But it highlights how much is open to interpretation. We look back through our own modern lens, too.
Whatever the truth, she's definitely achieved gothic icon status now. Total vampire prototype in pop culture.
A powerful archetype. The evil noblewoman, mixing horror, power, sexuality.
You see her everywhere. Horror movies like Countess Dracula, novels, metal lyrics, anime like Castlevania.
Fate Grand Order, video games. Her appeal just endures.
She's even a goth fashion icon, that whole vibe.
And interestingly, she's also been reclaimed by some as a feminist figure.
Right. Arguing she was smeared by the patriarchy to take down a powerful woman. It shows how we keep reinterpreting these figures.
It's a fascinating example of challenging old narratives, looking at gender and power through a new lens.
Then Catch's Castle, where it all supposedly happened, now a tourist spot.
Dark tourism, yeah. People want that tangible connection to these grim stories.
Okay, now for some of the really WTF details from the testimonies. Deep cuts here.
Brace yourself.
Apparently, she sometimes bit chunks of flesh from servant girls' faces. Just bit them.
That detail, if true, suggests a level of personal sadism that's particularly chilling, beyond normal torture, if there is such a thing.
Then the story of the maid beaten so badly her hands were amputated. And the claim Elizabeth then forced her to cook and eat her own hand.
It's almost unimaginable cruelty. These details cement the monstrous image, whether they're completely factual or embellished over time. They tap into primal fears.
Remember the 650 victims ledger? A priest claimed he saw it, a diary detailing everything.
But it's never been found. Vanished.
The ultimate missing evidence adds to the mystery, the cover-up theories. Or maybe it never existed.
Exactly. And then there's that quote from her servant, Dorca.
Oh, yeah, Dorca said she helped torture because, quote, the Countess told me to do it and I liked it.
Chilling. Shows potential complicity, the corrupting influence of that environment. Raises questions about her inner circle.
And the escaped girl fell from a window, impaled on a tree.
And no investigation followed. Just nothing.
It screams untouchable nobility. The lack of accountability is staggering.
Starkly illustrates the power imbalance and how little peasant lives matter to some.
And my personal favorite for just sheer weird audacity, sending a blood-soaked dress as a gift of beauty.
What even is that? It seems designed purely to shock, intimidate, taunt. A complete disregard for any norm.
So after this whole bizarre journey, wading through the testimonies, the legends, where do we stand?
Honestly, we may never know for sure. Was she history's worst female serial killer? Or a victim of a massive political setup?
The ambiguity is probably why we're still talking about her, isn't it?
Absolutely. That lack of a definitive answer keeps the debate going, allows for all these interpretations.
She went from this brutal, powerful noblewoman surrounded by dark rumor
to a full-blown legend, a figure of folklore, of fear, trapped in that tower in our collective imagination. Her transformation is amazing.
It really is. Her story became something much bigger than just history.
So here's a final thought to leave people with.
Yeah.
Considering how her story twisted and changed over centuries, what does that tell us about how we remember powerful women, especially women who break the mold?
And what is it about her story, the power, the alleged violence, the mystery, the maybe vampire stuff? Why does that specific mix still grab us so much today? What keeps us coming back to this bizarre journey?